And
I know, me too.
yeah, that's great. And then, so today we're going to be talking about the effect of that stress can have on our hair, right? Because Mary has experienced that handedly when you were working in London as a lawyer,
I was between London and Paris, but
yeah,
essentially, yes.
and you lost your hair. You had this huge patch of hair that was just disappearing, and you had to go to get to the bottom of what was happening because you were in your early 20s, right?
I was no, I was slightly older, so this was in I was about in my early 30s.
Early 30s. Okay.
Early 30s. I am now, and
Anyway,
full disclosure, I'm 36 now. And it happened about when I was in my early 30s. I developed
okay.
what's called alopecia areata. That's the medical term for it. And you start losing parts of your hair in
Yeah.
different patches. For me, it occurred in the back of my head, and it was bald, this big.
Crazy.
For a lot of people, it happens in different parts of the hair. But that was essentially what I experienced. In addition to just overall thinning, I probably had 60% less hair than I do now.
Wow.
So yeah, it really is quite devastating.
Because I mean, anxiety is really a sign of, it can be an accumulation of fear. And I mean, we're all going through this at the moment, and we have a lot of anxiety that comes up, and it's, even though if we don't feel it, I certainly have a different sleep pattern at the moment, and I'm sure that comes from somewhere related to fear. So what does anxiety do in the body? It higher your cortisol level, right? And that
You
can
know, the
instability, physical, obviously emotional.
So cortisol is the one that we most often speak of because it's a shorthand word of identifying a multitude of biochemical pathways and hormones and
Yes.
other endocrinological processes that happen in the body that are hugely disruptive. So what stress does is it elevates basically your entire flight or fight response in the body, which then puts you at heightened alert in a very defensive and aggressive stance. So in addition to its own effects, what it also does is it amplifies whatever is going on in the body that's already in a state of disease. So it's almost the gasoline on whatever condition is present in the body. So the levels at which stress really destroys the body are multiple. Cortisol is the one that we most often speak of, but there are, and the body in itself is really quite a genius design, and its whole process and goal is to achieve what's called homeostasis. And homeostasis is this state of balance in the body that's constantly in flux, but that's in balance. When that's thrown off, every biological and biochemical process in the body is disrupted. And for a lot of people, it manifests in a multitude of ways. Hair loss, hair breakout, emotional. For women, it's a menstrual disruption as well, because that's a very hormonal process.
Yeah.
So the list goes on.
I mean, yeah, and the hormonal cycles, they are cycles of, can be cycles of that are quite stressful. I mean, you can see it in PMS, or they come up as a menopausal symptoms, and we think that it's something that we have to live with and just get on with, and it's actually not true. We can balance this out through a lot of mental, obviously, activities, and for example, breath work may be one of them, to lower or coming to the rest and digest, right? The parasympathetic, activated parasympathetic nervous system, or through food, obviously, also, and through oils. Support of oils
Yes.
is super
So
fascinating, right?
yeah, so what I always say and what I've sort of learned truly is that the defense is multi-pronged, as in anything. So there is the meditative mental component, which, is hugely and scientifically proven to have beneficial effects. In America, actually, where I frankly consider things a little bit still backward in terms of, the more homeopathic or holistic approaches, the American Medical Association has now adopted meditation as a scientifically proven approach to allay stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
But short of that, I think for a lot of people, when you get stuck in this mental stress mode, that meditation, the breath work can sometimes be very, almost create more anxiety, because it's hard for you to step into that and mentally understand that you need to do these things. So it creates more stress. So you then go into other approaches to relieve that stress, whether it's, walking, whether it's certain um, received the call. I had to start that to relief. So what we've done, for example, in number 1 and number 2 here, which are the oils, is they have what are called the carboxyl and hydroxyl groups in the body, which at an epigenetic level will trigger responses in the body to counteract the effect that the stress is having. So your hair growth, for example, or your hair processes is intensely complex, one of the most complex in the body, and therefore oftentimes thought to be poorly understood, which is not necessarily true. There are over 1,200 genes that regulate your hair growth cycle. Okay, so when stress kicks in, it starts counteracting the genetic, expression that you need for hair to grow. But you're not helpless in those situations. You may allay your stress through breath work and through diet, but there are also other measures that you could take to get ahead of that. So much of this is not only proactive, but also preventative. So certain combinations as formulated of hydroxyl, carboxyl, and other phytonutrients studies have shown, go in and affect the expression of your genes. So they'll downregulate some genes and they'll upregulate some genes, the effect of which is to benefit your hair growth cycle. So even as stress is trying to ravage your body, it allays that. Another way that stress really damages the body is that it throws you into a chronic inflammation
Exactly.
situation.
Yeah.
And what chronic inflammation will do is that it has two very negative effects. One is it restricts your blood vessels, so blood isn't flowing, nutrients are not flowing to the parts of your body that need it the most. Hair, your heart, other organs. The other way that inflammation will damage your body is that it actually starts denaturing your DNA and your RNA. So your cells are not performing like they ought. So the reason that antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, the right kinds in the right proportions are beneficial is that they will counteract the chronic inflammation to allow your body to function as it knows it ought. Because your body knows, it's just hindered. Our job is to try to help it rather than hinder it. It's rather simple, but getting there is a process, like all things.
So just to introduce your brand to the listeners, because Mary has designed a hair oil, which is actually a scalp oil, right? Used on the scalp as well as on the hair, because we tend to forget that when we do take care of our hair and our skin, we stop right here, right? We stop here, we just go like this, we just think that there's not much there, not much to deal with, and so on. And actually, there's a lot of issues of, and actually not issues, but beauty factors. Let's talk about beauty, because that's yeah, what we all aiming for.
It's a wonderful thing, beauty. You know,
Yeah.
it's not any particular face or shape, but it's beauty is really a feeling, you
Yeah,
know, and you
exactly.
get to that feeling by, as you described, what you do.
Mm. And then, so because we tend to forget, we just do the surface. It's like we're just putting on, let's just put on makeup and never take it off. So what would happen, right? Our skin would just cry for help. It would just come out, break out, and we would be
Disastrous.
shining, and it would just blah, horrible, right? So the same thing's happening on our scalp, and we're a lot of people are still using chemical shampoos, and that's like no go. Like, please stop right away. And like, would you, you know, yeah, no chemicals, no, not on the fruit, not on my skin, not in
No,
my hair,
because
and not in my body, nowhere. And
absolutely, because
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's fine. And then you have totally tapped into that need for us to take care of our hair and our beauty. But more than that, I mean, by creating these amazing hair oils, hair and scalp oils that you have a different range of for different needs. And you created that because of the necessity, because you had to fix your hair issue, right? Your anxiety. I mean, you had to tap into what was creating the anxiety too, but also heal it, and as well as just support the continuous hair growth and skin condition. And maybe you revised your whole life too around it, because
All of the above.
yeah,
All of the above. So, you know,
and have
you
tested them. They're amazing. They are so great. And one reason, yeah,
I never tire of hearing it. So go on.
now we could go on for so long, because I created a shampoo for my son, because he ended up having possibly a little bit of anxiety. A lot of things happened in his life, in his young life. His parents got divorced. He changed schools 3 times. We changed cities from Tokyo to Paris, and the water conditions very different. So he created, he had dandruff. He's a young boy, teenager with dandruff. And I was like, wow, I thought this was only something for old men. Sorry.
No, my youngest alopecia client is 12 years old.
Yes, that's
So
my neighbor. So it's just being funny also. Anyway, so I created this oil, which I put into a natural shampoo, and it's one of his favorites. And then, but I'm not at all, you know, I wasn't producing it to sell it, but then I met you, and it's like, wow, this is just so amazing. The way you, yeah, what you tapped into because of your own experience. And I think it's because you had this experience that you could create something that was so on spot of what a lot of people need before you even have that issue, right? Before you so far in your anxiety that you have to have
there's the expression that says necessity is the mother of all invention, and never has it been more true than in my case. So I'm trained as an international lawyer, and that's what I was working at. I was working on, you know, a multi-billion-dollar nuclear power plant dispute. I was flying to Erlangen and Nuremberg to, you know, understand what was going on with this nuclear power plant. So when this happened to me, and bear with me, this is going somewhere, I felt as at ease sitting down with people dealing with the science and care of hair as any other, because by profession, I'm trained to drop into a situation, understand the totality of it with such comprehensiveness that I could defend it in any tribunal in the world. And so now my tribunal happens to be, you know, all the men and women in the world who need it. But it started truly when originally the products were developed. I had no intention of becoming MFLORENS. They were done for me because I was walking around with an enormous bald spot and no hair on my head. And so I had to understand, A, why this was happening, and B, how do I, you know, get all this back, because I come from a family of, my father is a doctor. My grandmother actually in the 60s and 70s was an apothecary and a pharmacist, and she was very well known for creating green, clean, all natural beauty creams and formulations well before this was a thing in common culture. So one day she called me and she said, Mary, you listen to me. This is not a fait accompli. This does not have to be the case. Science and medicine prove that with all natural ingredients you could heal yourself. And never ever forget, beauty is as beauty does. And that really resonated with me. And so I came out from this insane depression and this like maddening, you know, state where when I would brush my hair, I would have to close my eyes because I did not want to see the amount of hair that I was losing. But I came to a point where I had to push all of that back and say, whatever is happening is not me. This is just happening to my body, and I need to figure out a way to get through this. And so one thing led to another, and after a year and a half of formulation, of studying, you know, the science behind the hair, this is, you know, it's a very rigorous process to figure out the formulations, the ingredients, the sourcing. And, you know, within 8 to 10 months, my hair had grown back. In my bald spot, my hair was filling in. I felt wonderful because I was caring for my body in a way that I had never done before. And you and I talked about this previously, where, you know, the body knows one code, and that code is excellence. You know, that's what your cells, that's what nature is tuned to operate at. The mind is very powerful. It could say, you could try to trick you, or, oh, that's okay, this chemical's not going to hurt me. But the body says, you know, sorry, no can do. What happens? Disease. What's the clearest manifestation of that? Your hair loss. So you go ahead and trick yourself all you want. Your body says, no, merci, you know, this isn't going to work. And so, you know, once people started asking for it, we decided to actually incorporate and become a brand and really change the dialogue about what we think of scalp and hair. And you said this so beautifully earlier. The line here is completely arbitrary. Thousands of dollars, thousands of hours, rituals. We stop right there. Well, this right here is this. You know, the principles of care are identical, and maybe even more important, because this is the soil for your hair to grow, you know. And, you know, that's not to say you won't have bad hair days. That's not to say you won't experience some loss cyclically. You know, you could take the best care of your face and still have breakouts and still feel a little bit dry. This is the body, you know, this is natural. But the care is a lifelong commitment that I intend to start teaching my daughter, whom I don't have, you know, from an early age. As important as like brushing her teeth and caring for her face is caring for your scalp. And I think, you know, the more we start to think about it in that term, the more, for most people, hair is this like wild unknown. It either falls or it looks good. There's no happy medium of care and nurture and patience. And that's all part of the process, really. So, and Florens, actually, M is my first initial, Mary, but Florens is actually, it's a Latin word, and it means flourishing and prospering and abounding. And I just think it's so beautiful for your hair, but also for life generally. So that's where MFLORENS comes from.
Lovely name. Yeah. Look at your hair now. I mean, you know, it's so beautiful.
I have to be, I'll have a moment of, I'll set humility aside for a moment and say, I have never had better hair than I do now. Not in my 20s, you know, not before alopecia. And I truly, never has there been a period of time since the products were formulated, it's going on 3 years now, that I have not used this. Generally today, I would have the mask on and my head wrapped, but I made a sole exception to do it before and wash. But this is something that's sacrosanct to me. You know, it's just,
Tell me about them, because you definitely, because you decided to, you created this formulation basically for yourself, and then you have put it into, you know, onto the market, and they're usually, when we create something for ourselves, we really look at the best quality, right, and best ingredient. And then usually what a lot of companies do when they put something out on the market, they start cutting the prices here and there, cutting the costs, you know, and then the quality goes down. And I mean, look what happened to, sorry, Aveda, but sorry, there it is.
You said it, not I.
Yeah, I said it, and that's a shame. And so for you, it really is. That was like a no go. You would not cut, you know, the quality. And we will be open to answer the questions just in a minute. So thanks for bearing with us. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first time you and I spoke, we instantly bonded when I said, I view what I'm doing and everyone else as an extension of me. I've been like that my whole life. When I get really happy and excited about something, like, I want to share it and I want to give it. And I can't even imagine that you would do anything less for anyone else than you do for yourself. It's this, you know, it's an innate feeling. And you said, Mary, that's exactly how I feel. You know, I view everyone and I connect with everyone very, very personally. And so, you know, we created with not having any cost considerations in mind. And it took us a while to come to market because it was important to maintain all of that. You know, they retail for about 100 or euros each. But within that is a commitment to the best ingredients in the world, you know, cold pressed, well grown, well processed, no plastic, eco packaging. And, you know, there's a value in that because, you know, the alternative is poor health. The alternative is much more cost in terms of anxiety and depression and loss, and you can't monetize that. It's really all about priorities. I appreciate that we are blessed and fortunate enough to be even having this conversation. You know, there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of people right now who are, you know, much worse off, and you know, I'm constantly aware of that. So this is a blessing, and to be able to take care of yourself is really the best good fortune. And so with that comes a certain responsibility to do it. You know, it's honoring the sacredness of life, really, and one another. And I feel very, very passionately about that.
Because I mean, you choose to use essential oils because of their effect that it has on topical and what's it called once it's absorbed
into your endocrine system, into your bloodstream.
Into the bloodstream, because it has an incredible domino effect. Once it actually goes into the bloodstream, it just checks out what's happening inside, and it goes like dack, fixing stuff.
100%.
You don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just the body's just doing that. I mean, the oils, the effect of the oils is doing that in the body. But it also has a very good psychological effect, because I use oils. You know, I used oils when I went through hardship. I mean, I used oils also when I went not through hardship, but I actually, you know, I just use oils, essential oils, every day, and I use them in my yoga practice, and when I teach, I make blends for my clients and so on. And the effect, the psychological effect of the scents, and as you know, they're priceless, because they just transport you into another mood, and you know, and uplift you, and you know.
And that goes back to beauty is as beauty does, you know, in that process of, you know, of caring, of nurturing, of just like having a good meal, or just like, you know, bathing your child or going for a walk, you know, in that process of caring, you sort of draw life into yourself, and therein arises this sense of beauty that is truly long lasting. You can't tie it to any one state beauty, because that will go like this. And along with that, your mental health and your confidence. So once you peg beauty to a process, you have it your entire life. I see my grandmother at 80 now. You know, she's obviously doesn't have the same, face or, whatever, but she's beautiful because she's evolved through a process.
Beautiful. Aging
Yeah.
gracefully. And we
Exactly.
had, yeah, there was a question here on how to, wait, can I find it? Scroll up on how to, what kind of routine how to care for our hair. Okay, let's say somebody does not have
Do we have about 24 hours? Because I could go on for 24 hours on this. But
no, somebody doesn't have your oils yet. Yeah, somebody who doesn't have tested your oils yet. So, what's your advice for someone who's
So my advice is to start first and foremost. It's a mental shift. Your scalp and your hair start at a cellular level, and the principles of care for it are identical. So you need a first line of defense, which is a deep, natural exfoliation, cleansing. What a lot of people don't realize is that you also need an antimicrobial for your scalp and hair, because there are fungi, virus, bacteria, microbes that live in your scalp that actually do a lot of the damage, just like acne is caused by a lot of a bacterial infection. So with number one, what we've done is it's got 25 plus ingredients, and it's a multi-pronged, what I call the super A's, which is the alpha hydroxys, the antiseptic, the astringent, and the antimicrobials, plus the anti-inflammatories that are going to clear away your scalp, simultaneously nourishing it with antioxidants and anti-inflammatories to allow your cells to kick back into normal operation. And then supplementing that intermittently with number two, which has some of nature's most powerful vasodilators, as well as those genes that I referred to earlier that express hair growth, that are going to be triggering that to revive your cells to turn over and regenerate. Because the follicle, the hair follicle, isn't static. It grows, it shrinks, it goes dormant. So if you're not caring for your follicles, what happens is that what's called follicle miniaturization, which eventually leads to follicle dormancy. That's why over time you lose the number of hair, but that's not essential. Okay. So that's the two case. In terms of other products that you put on, we have a rule of thumb, right? So if you wouldn't do it to your face, don't do it to your scalp and hair. That's our rule of thumb. Now we realize that, that's going to be broken by, people like to dye their hair, and we understand, like there's an element of like pleasure and beauty and hair color. Understood, we're realists here. Yeah. But bear in the back of your mind, if you wouldn't do it to your face, you shouldn't be doing it to your scalp. It's at your peril. The other thing, your hair tools. Every 4 to 6 weeks, like your makeup brushes, you must clean them or change them. Okay. Your pillowcase is a sponge of dirt, bacteria, microbes. Change it at least once a week. And the other one that I just can't stress enough, do not touch your hair or your scalp at any cost unless you've washed your hands and you're styling it. Anecdotally, observation has shown that people who play with their scalp, play with their hair, lose on average 30 to 50% more strands of hair than people who don't. That's a number one sure shot way. So now, I like to touch my hair. Who doesn't? But what I do now is I'll do this or I'll do this. And once you start noticing this, it's really quite maddening to realize how much you stick your hands in your hair. And so that is the number one big no-no. All of these together, and then commitment. This is a lifelong commitment. You don't brush your teeth once and say, oh, I'm set for a couple of weeks. You don't eat once and you say, oh, I'm good for a week. That's just not how the body needs consistent, regular care. And for hair, even though the treatment is similar to the skin, the result process is more like the body. You don't work out once and expect the bod that you want. It takes at least 4 to 8 weeks. There's a
Yeah.
similar process with the hair
Yeah.
because the growth phase, expresses in that way.
Okay.
Committed, caring, conscientious, and the right products. And in my view, the right products for the scalp and the hair are truly MFLORENS. I wouldn't have created them if I didn't think that that was what was essential. I look at, multi-$100 product ingredient lists and I'm like, oh my God, no. And
Yeah.
so, read the
The
ingredient list.
synthetic perfume. Oh my God, no.
Everything. And the body rejects it.
Yeah.
The body rejects it. It does not appreciate it. And over time, we accept a certain level of disease and illness. But, a large percent of that is man-made,
Yeah.
just like all the bad ingredients.
It's funny, I had to wait. I used a lot of the natural ingredients for a long time, but everything shifted when I was pregnant for the first time, and when this responsibility for feeding myself was feeding the baby too, everything shifted, and then the baby was out there, and what everything else around it was just like, wait. Even the clothing, which is still hard to find now, natural botanical diet and so on, but we have to be kind of realistic to where we live and what we can afford and what's on the market. But since my daughter's been interested in makeup, it's had also shifted. So many brands are just like, no, thank you. Even not for free, I'm okay. And
yeah,
now
it's interesting you say what you do about pregnancy because, I've been thinking about this, the past few days, and the way we should be caring for our body always is the way we care for our body when we're giving birth to life.
Yeah, exactly.
So the recommendations for pregnancy should actually be extrapolated to recommendations for everyday life. Because if you wouldn't do it because you're nurturing life, well, every day you're nurturing life in your body. Your cells are constantly in growth, regeneration, rejuvenation. And so, that's another great rule of thumb. If you wouldn't do it if you're pregnant, don't do it otherwise, but it's also life. There's an element of, you live once, or you will seek pleasure, and everything in balance.
Yeah.
But
I need
some
to have
things,
a conscious shift, men and women.
yeah.
I'm so happy. So I don't know if there's any more questions or anybody wants to know. We will have this interview on live for as long as Instagram lets us, and I'll try to put it together later on the website. And
and I just like to say that a lot of people have oftentimes have questions. So if you do have questions, and if you can't think of them now, or you're wondering how, what, please reach out. I know Abby's always open to questions. I know my team and I are always open to questions. Feel free to reach out, engage us, have conversations, because so much of it is simply having conversations and having questions and setting your mind at ease about, what you think is going on, what you think you can do. We talked about that feeling of helplessness the last time, and helplessness, it really is a killer. And once oh, I could do this, or oh, I could do that, all of a sudden you get this like sense of empowerment that then makes it more that makes it more likely for you to take good care of yourself. And so that's part of it. I hear someone about hair vitamins, and I don't know if you have any views, Abby, but in terms of hair vitamins, it's a little bit tricky. I personally don't take hair vitamins, but I would always first and foremost say, consult your doctor about what your specific nutritional needs are. But I also know that, at a certain point, they are oftentimes extracted, and they are oftentimes don't provide, just like eating a whole apple is better than eating, you know, the pectin extracted from an apple, because in the whole ingredient you have the polyphenols, the enzymes, the actives, you know, the other nutrients that are going to be essential for the proper processing and digesting of that one key vitamin that your body needs. And
Yeah.
so to isolate one specific item and ingest that, you know, sometimes it does more harm than good, because people also develop this false sense of complacency. Oh, I've taken this vitamin, I don't need to do X, Y, and Z. So what I would always advise is speak to your doctor, see if you have a specific need for it, but it would not be an obvious go-to, because your body requires whole, you know, foods and whole ingredients. And that's part of the reason that, you know, you and I are so passionate about the purity and the potency of your ingredients, because the more whole they are, the more wildcrafted they are, the better for you. That's why it's the commitment to unrefined, unprocessed, you know, minimally treated is essential. And that's part of the process of being a good consumer, is to know which brands are committed to that.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's something that's a process. I can assure my customers of that. And that's incumbent on all other companies to be able to do that.
Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah.
Pleasure. Feel free to reach out anytime with any other questions.
I'm sure there will be questions coming up, and then just reach out. You can contact Mary or contact me, but Mary is definitely the specialist on this subject. And it's just an enormous pleasure to talk with you, and I'm sure we'll be back and we'll be chatting on
with pleasure. Anytime you call me, and I'll throw on some lipstick and jump on.
Great. Well, have a great day. Have a nice evening, whoever's watching or wherever you're from. Have a nice day, and lovely day to you in LA.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who joined, and Abby for hosting me. I look forward to everything that you write and say, and I'm happy to be a part of this. So have a good evening in Paris.
Thank you very much. Merci.
Merci, au revoir.
Au revoir.